Hi, my name is Daman Basu, and I have written a review article on vitiligo, which is an immunological or autoimmune disorder. And I got the help of a mentor named Peter Voorhees, who is super helpful. I've never ever written a research paper before, so it was very insightful to have his help and his guidance through this journey. But yeah, so this project is about vitiligo. We will be covering pathogenesis, etiology, psychological impacts, and treatments. And whatever I'm presenting for you today are facts I have compiled over the course of writing my review article. So, as shown in the abstract, this is like my abstract copy pasted from my article. If you want to check it out, you can visit this URL or the QR code below. And in short form, the abstract is aimed to say that the article is intended to sort of be for the general public to get their facts straight or get to know more about vitiligo in order to properly divulge into scientific articles or getting to know the next steps if they're concerned about the fact that they have vitiligo or if they want to know more about this disease or how people may get it or preventative measures. This article is essentially aimed to answer all of those queries that a common person may have and encourage them to further do their own research. So, what is vitiligo? Vitiligo currently affects 2% of the world's population today, and it has been around since ancient times, since the Indus Valley Civilization and ancient Egypt in sacred texts, ancient texts. And it's known as a disease, immunological disease that's often present on the skin of individuals in the form of chalky white macules or depigmented blotches of skin caused by melanocyte loss during its progression. So, a bit of context, melanocytes are skin cells that protect the skin by not only providing pigment, but also providing, safety from UV light coming from the sun. And with the loss of melanocytes triggered by the immune system, this leaves the skin unprotected, causing more sensitivity of skin and depigmented skin. So, this disorder may also be present on hair or nails of individuals. So, for example, on the leftmost diagram, we see kind of like um, a theoretical patient diagram, which I have illustrated. All of the illustrations, by the way, are from thanks to BioRender. But yeah, this illustration on the left depicts a potential vitiligo patient's vitiligo blotches throughout their body. And vitiligo is not subject to one part of the body only. You can have it literally anywhere that's covered in skin, hair, or nails. And again, it's also seen in the patient, the rightmost patient, where it's mainly only on like a strand of her hair. And then in the middle patient, friend of ours, who's agreed to have his photo taken, we can see that vitiligo is present not only on his face but also in regions near his throat. So things to know. So vitiligo, although mainly genetically passed down based on traits and inheritance of genes, it can be caused by other risk factors. And vitiligo is generally much more noticeable in the skin of darker pigmented people or more melanated people. And there's two main forms of vitiligo, although treatment doesn't really differ or vary much based on the form. But those forms are segmental and non-segmental. So segmental vitiligo is vitiligo typically having blotches in one side of the body and a non-uniform, I guess, distribution of the spread, whereas the progression of non-segmental indicates kind of a more balanced out or uh, a more like symmetrical spread of vitiligo in on the body. So, for example, pertaining to the noticeability of vitiligo, over here I've procured two images of theoretical patients with vitiligo. So the uppermost has light skin and not too noticeable. I mean, if you look closely, you could probably see the blotches. But at the bottom, you see someone who's much more pigmented, and the vitiligo is much more noticeable. So, because of the noticeability of the disease, even though it's not generally harmful or life threatening, vitiligo can actually be quite concerning for many who have the condition. Because people in this day and age are still very conscious about how they look. So to be strikingly noticeable and so unique, it's a very acquired appearance that you have if you have vitiligo. So people may be really insecure about that, and this may trigger the onset of a lot of mental health issues such as body dysmorphia. And other concerns of vitiligo can be skin sensitivity, which we will cover a bunch of other times, including sunburn. And vitiligo patients need to combat that through the frequent usage of powerful SPFs. And vitiligo has no apparent cure yet, which we will also discuss later. So without further ado, let's dive into the epidemiology, etiology, and environmental factors behind vitiligo. So although vitiligo is genetically acquired, as mentioned, environmental factors have a huge say in whether or not you get vitiligo, or even they can also bring forth and encourage traits that may be underlying that can support the initiation of vitiligo. So examples of environmental factors are abrasions to skin. So, for example, any irritants you commonly have, or scratches to skin, or kind of like friction, rubbing that may not always be in the skin's best interest, leading to skin damage, could cause vitiligo because it'll trigger the immune system. And sunburn is also a big player for like a big factor that comes into play for vitiligo because it also leads to skin damage, and then potent chemical exposure can also be a big deal breaker. Whether or not you have vitiligo, for example, you can even start with skincare products that you may be allergic to, which is why I'm interested in being a dermatologist, so I know this piece of information. It's important to test out your products on a test area to make sure you're not allergic, to make sure they're not toxic to you, etc. So in some cases where someone may directly apply it on their skin in such a potent amount, uh, you know, the skin will the skin will get damaged, leading to potential vitiligo. Pre-existing immune health related implications may also be immense triggers for vitiligo. And believe it or not, in my experience of writing this article, I have found out that many conditions are tied to vitiligo just based on the fact that they're immunological. For example, alopecia areata is very closely tied to vitiligo, and a majority of the patients with vitiligo are also known to have some sort of extent of alopecia. And alopecia, for context, is a condition where you typically will lose hair follicles or production of hair. And another factor for vitiligo is vitamin and nutrient deficiencies. So, for example, one strikingly important vitamin that you need to have is vitamin B12, not just for not just for preventing vitiligo, but also just for maintaining healthy DNA, creating DNA, and for also maintaining a healthy body and healthy organs and healthy skin overall. So more on sunburns. Sunburns are an integral part in the study of vitiligo. Not only can they trigger the onset as previously discussed, but they're dangerous because when you have vitiligo, given the fact that you don't have the melanocytes or sufficient melanocytes in the blotch areas, you are most likely going to have much more hypersensitive skin in those areas that are more susceptible to skin damage via sunburn, like the UV rays, UV light, and this will ultimately lead to potential skin cancer even. Here is some pathogenesis. So vitiligo is characterized as a multifactorial polygenic autoimmune disorder, which essentially means it's caused by more than one gene in the body. I mean, in your genes. So this disorder is autosomal dominant in terms of inheritance, which means that there's a much more likely chance that the trait's going to be inherited from either one parent. And if you know what a Punnett square is, if you don't know what a Punnett square is, that's the diagram I have over here for you at the bottom, right? And it basically shows the inheritance, like the likelihood of inheritance of an autosomal dominant disorder. So that is represented by the capital A. So the individuals with a capital A, like the potential offspring, are there's like a 50% chance that they'd be affected. So a similar situation would happen for vitiligo patients if they were having a genetic case of vitiligo. In terms of progression varies from person to person and can be gradual or sudden. Some people may not face progression of vitiligo at all, while others may have rapid and continuous progression that could even span to the entire of their body. And so this is a diagram I've procured of vitiligo progression. As you can see, it starts from like the lip corners of the patient and eventually progresses into covering the majority of their lower face, as well as parts of their like near collarbone and um, around one eye. So here are some physiological and psychological impacts of vitiligo. So for physiological, we have, as previously mentioned, the skin sensitivity. And then there's a misconception that vitiligo causes skin cancer. It doesn't cause skin cancer. There's no strong evidence for that. However, having vitiligo means having weaker skin or like less durable and protected skin, which ultimately can lead to skin damage, which will lead to skin cancer. And then there's an interesting article by IJERPH. So you can check this tiny URL out, and that's one of the sources I used for my article. So it was very informative, and that will give a much more into depth explanation on that. And for vitiligo patients, they are recommended to use SPF 100 and above. Although for regular patients, it's 50 and above. The only reason being interested in dermatology, I know that SPF 50 is the standard and it's sufficient, and anything above that doesn't do much other things in terms of protection. But for vitiligo patients, the reason why they recommend 100 and above is just to make sure that there's like the least minimal possible chance of like any penetration of UV, light onto the skin, especially like a vitiligo affected area. And also, another thing I'd like to point out is that tanning beds and tanning methods that utilize UV are also like very detrimental because they still will damage even healthy skin oftentimes for even regular people. So, which is why it's strongly discouraged that vitiligo patients use this as a method to try to like even out their skin tone or try to fix it because it ultimately will just do you more bad than potentially good things. Here are some psychological impacts. So there has been observation as previously discovered of vitiligo causing mental health issues, such as body dysmorphia and other conditions. So in these instances, people will want to cover up and hide or like conceal their vitiligo affected areas. So, for example, a person might wear a mask, or they might wear, not baggy clothing, but like more covered up clothing, anything to like conceal their like perceivably flawed areas. And this is unfortunate for people, especially aged 15 to 35. So, teenagers, even preteens to like young adults, where they tend to feel more conscious about how they look, and they will tend to, as mentioned, try to bring forth the best appearance of themselves. And vitiligo can also bring forth difficulty with social interaction because of the fact that people will go to extreme lengths with these mental problem, not mental health problems, to try to conceal what they perceive as a flawed appearance. So they will try to like go to such lengths like avoid social interaction, which ultimately does more harm than good for these patients, and which is why many treatments include psychological therapy, getting a counselor or therapist to like evaluate you for body dysmorphia. Just talking it out, it really helps. And also, it's advice like for people to build up their self confidence in order to effectively have good strategies for building ways of exposure to expose yourself and teach your mind and train it that okay, you know what, accept how I am, accept I have vitiligo, and move on. So self-esteem issues also come into play, and again, social anxiety, depression, all of that. So we've kind of just divulged into some psychological treatments. So as per vitiligo itself, there is no cure. That is mainly thought to be because we don't have the adequate knowledge on how to inhibit certain protein pathway processes from occurring, which could, control if a person has or doesn't have vitiligo. And there are a lot of treatment options from even way back when, from when they were like the ancient times. For example, in ancient Egypt and ancient India, they had a lot of texts describing that they would have people use things similar to home remedies today, which are rich in sorolin, which are rich in sorolin, which is a component that's known to provide pigment to the skin. And these treatments overall, like whatever is listed here, are mainly aimed to kind of camouflage vitiligo with the skin or um, reduce inflammation or itchiness or irritation, if any. A popular treatment option today is light therapy, where you'll be put into a light box, and then they'll have different like frequencies of light showed onto your skin, especially the afflicted areas with vitiligo. Again, all of these are an attempt to even out your skin. And my thought after like writing the article is that I think we're so close. We've identified a lot of vitamins, proteins that are associated. But if we eventually find a way to only inhibit a certain type of um, involved proteins without like, harming the patient at hand, we could potentially reduce the amount of people who suffer from vitiligo, and that could be hugely beneficial to society as we know it. Because um, if a disease like this affects 2% of the people worldwide today, and it's increasing in number, it's eventually going to be a huge problem for people who don't know how to deal with it. And of course, we have to normalize it, which is also equally important. So that's why it's important to be accepting of people with vitiligo, and because there is no cure, and to support them. But without further ado, that's my presentation for today. So if you have any questions, I will be here in the chat, hopefully, to answer your questions. So thank you so much once again.